Pi, and we are on with Lisa Kolb and Annie Buck, and we are going to be going over yet another really important topic, unfortunately, talking about ADA website accessibility. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things before we start. We are recording this, and it will be available on the website by tomorrow. We will also be sending it out in next week's News You Can Use. And if you have any questions, Annie will be handling questions, and I believe she will be asking them, and Lisa will be answering them as you guys have them. So welcome, Lisa and Annie, and please take it away.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me, Heather. I know that there is so many legal things happening today for our innkeeping industry, and ADA is just one of many. I mean, we have GDPR, we have ADA, the things that are happening with the OTAs. I mean, it just goes on, and I understand that it can get overwhelming. So I want to thank all of you who have come today, because these aren't fun topics. They're important, but they're not overly fun. So let's just jump into the overview. I have asked Heather to pop in if she has anything extra that she can add as we go through this. She follows this just as closely as I do. So I am sure she will have some insight that she can share too. So let's just jump into the American Disabilities Act overview. So the information that we're sharing is not intended as legal advice. I can't give you legal advice. I'm not an attorney, thank goodness. So I am sharing with you from a technical standpoint what I understand that your web presence needs to, how your web presence needs to behave to be as ADA compliant, and I'm doing that in air quotes, as possible. If you have specific issues, if you have been summoned or cited by somebody trying to bring a lawsuit against you, even if you're confused as what it means for you to be grandfathered into, oh, do I have to be ADA compliant or not? You should talk to your attorney on all those kind of things. And this is based on what I know today, and this is changing constantly. So this will be obsolete as soon as we're finished with it, but it's a good starting point. And these things just keep changing. States are making changes that are in addition to what the federal government has, as the actual legal system is taking these things into consideration. They are setting new statutes and precedences. I mean, there's a lot happening in this arena. So this is what we understand ADA as it exists right now. So here's the basic premise. A person who is disabled, who is blind or has low vision, or they can't hear, or they're prone to seizures when looking at a moving object. Anybody who has that type of disability or any other disability that impairs them from using your website just as it is, they have the right to experience your website in the exact type of environment that a non-disabled person does. You cannot discriminate by having your website not give a person who has a disability the ability to utilize your website and get to the same outcome as a non-disabled person. Now, there are physical and there are web ADA type guidelines. Now, physical are things like handicap showers, ramps. Even like in Florida, there were a lot of lawsuits because lodging properties had swimming pools that didn't have the handicapped machinery to lower a handicapped person into the pool and pull them back out. I mean, there's lots of physical things that come along with ADA, but that's not really what we're talking about today. We're talking about the web side of ADA, your website, your videos, your booking engine, things like that. Now, at the federal level, the DOJ does not require a private business to be ADA compliant. It's not in the federal guidelines. Private businesses don't fall under those guidelines right now, but that isn't stopping people from suing businesses. So at the state level, we're finding that states may too have additional guidelines in place regarding ADA. So not only do you have to understand the federal level, which, by the way, we are not beholden to use an old phrase, but that doesn't that doesn't keep you from getting sued. It just means that the government hasn't dictated that this be for private businesses yet. And then some properties may be exempt from the physical. I've had innkeepers say, well, I'm less than 5 rooms and I live on the premise, so I'm exempt. But that does not necessarily mean you're exempt from the website, because a disabled person still has use of your website whether they ever book with you or not. So, and actually physically come to the property. So, there is a lot to consider when it comes to ADA. Now, let's talk about the Department of Justice update. They initially put out something called a Web Content Accessibility Guideline, and it's the WCAG. You'll sometimes hear people call it the WCAG. I think it's weird. We're going to go with letters, WCAG. And then it was based on meetings and decisions and input from the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3 World Wide Web C for Consortium. And the original WCAG 2.0, what they said was required initially for ADA compliance was done way back in 2008. And I will give Heather access to this so you guys can go look up all the links. And then in June of 2018, we came out, 10 years later, practically, we came out with WCAG 2.1. And that's where they added 17 new additional criteria to address accessibility barriers, and mainly related to mobile devices and people with disabilities that affect visual and cognitive functions. So the WCAG 2.0 is the one that most webmasters are trying to help you get to. The WCAG 2.1, it's brand new. It's barely been addressed. So you may want to talk to your webmaster about, well, obviously they should be handling the 2.0s for you, but what about the 2.1s, and what does that mean, and when are they going to get to that, et cetera, et cetera. So there is documentation on both of those. Now, there are different levels of compliance. Inside of each of these sets of guidelines, there's A, there's AA, there's AAA. And A and AA are the ones that most private businesses are trying to meet, even though the Department of Justice doesn't tell us we have to. But you don't want to discriminate against anyone. We want everybody to be able to at least experience our inn's websites, even if they physically can't come to the inn because maybe you don't have an elevator, etc. They still should be able to experience the website itself. So A's and AA's are typically the ones where most private businesses are using their webmasters to try to meet. Now, why has this gotten all hot and heavy right now? Well, there are some inns that are being sued. And as website accessibility standards they just keep changing. The businesses have to spend a bunch of time and money to try to limit their liability. That's what we're talking about, is how do you limit your liability? You can't be ADA guaranteed compliant. It's not possible, because anybody can sue you for anything. And everybody interprets the guidelines a different way. And there's constantly changing guidelines between the federal government and the state level. So we're after a moving target here, and it's really, really hard. That's probably why most people are shying away from even trying to do anything, because you never know when you're done, because you never really are done. Private businesses are being sued, even though the DOJ didn't say we had to be compliant, but they're still getting sued. So on June 22nd, this is interesting, because this is where there are a group of 103 members of the House of Representatives have asked that the DOJ actually curb website accessibility lawsuits, because they're going haywire, and we're going to talk about what haywire means. But that was in June, and that went out to see if the DOJ would actually act. We have not heard answers as far as I know. Heather, have you heard anything since June? I haven't heard anything.
No, I have not heard anything new, just that it's continuing to be in the news.
Okay. So you can read about it on this article, or you can just go in and look for the the House of Representatives being asked by groups of Americans saying, "Hey, you guys have to help us. You know, we're just basically at the mercy of anybody who wants to sue us." So there's just many, many news articles out there that say that if you live in Florida, New York, or California, those are the three most heavy hit states for ADA lawsuits. And I went digging because there was a select registry member that was sued. She had a brand new website within days of that new website going out there, and it wasn't an Acorn client. So I stumbled on it from an SR newsletter. So I started digging, and I used dockets.justia.com, and I started looking in Florida, and then I was digging down for B&Bs, and I found them. I tied it back, and I figured out who it was. I also stumbled on a handful of other innkeepers who were being sued in Florida. But this isn't just Florida. This will tell you anybody who has ADA lawsuits against them in any state. So basically, you cannot preclude being sued. Anyone can be sued by anyone. Now, what I did find that was interesting, and actually, let me go back and see if I can bring up dockets.justia.com. Okay, this is what it looks like. And you can basically go in and you can say all lawsuit types, but you can also go, let's see if I can, it's under, I haven't been in here a little bit. I thought it was under civil rights. Where's my ADA stuff? There it is. Americans with Disabilities Other. And you can pick, I think you can pick states. So let's just pick Colorado because that's where I am. And you can start looking at the different lawsuits from different things. And then I started digging through to find B&Bs. When I did Florida, I was digging through B&Bs. And you can start to see the different people that are being sued. Some of these are based on ADA employment issues. Others are personal injury. But then you can dig down and find just the ones that are, let's see, I think it's civil rights. And then Americans with Disabilities Other. Yep. And then you can just look through them. Well, in Colorado, I've got 573 cases filed. And these go back. They're not just recent. But if I were to go back and look in Florida, let's go back to Florida. Now, that was in the 500s. Let's go to Florida. And they have 269,000. So Florida obviously is a heavy hitter for these kind of lawsuits. So if you want to look some things up, this is a great little free tool to look things up on. Okay, so in Florida, I went digging after I figured out which SR member got sued. I went to figure out, well, is there just like some common thread here going on where, you've got certain plaintiffs or certain, lawyers that are going after these folks? And I found 3 plaintiffs in Florida. One's name was Cohan, one was Kennedy, and one was Poshman. I think Cohen had the fewest, a couple hundred. Kennedy, 500-600. Poshman, 1,500. I mean, we were talking over 2,000 lawsuits filed by 3 different plaintiffs. And they just seemed to be picking on anybody they could find that looked like they would be a candidate to be sued. I mean, there were just 3 people doing 2,000 of these. Basically, if you just miss one alt tag, and we're going to talk about alt tags, on a blog post from like 5 years ago, that can be enough to invoke a lawsuit. I mean, just one little itty bitty thing or something that you interpreted wrong. It just depends on if the plaintiff who wants to come after you decides to come after you or not. So the whole gotcha here is if you're in the process of selling, and I stumbled on this one. There was another in Florida that had just had a lawsuit taken out on them for ADA website non-compliancy, and they were in the process of selling. they have to deal with this lawsuit before they can close the sale. So they really are in a bad way, that particular one in. So basically, here's the bottom line. This is what we're teaching our clients, and this is what I want all innkeepers to think about. You don't want to be that low-hanging fruit for a potential plaintiff. You want them to pass you by. Now, your goal is obviously you don't want to be sued. And you want to make every effort to make sure your website, your videos, your booking engine, that you're doing, your webmaster is helping you do, because this is your responsibility to request it. It is up to you to ask for it and to verify that it gets done. You can test it. I'm going to show you some testing tools. You can download the reader, and you can run through your website using a reader like a blind person would use. And you can see how it works. You can double check. Don't just trust your webmaster to tell you it's fixed. Go look, because you're the one who's going to be responsible, not the webmaster. So make sure that you're following those guidelines. These are the WCAG guidelines we talked about. They're all listed on this website. So you want to make sure that a prolific plaintiff, one of those people like Poshman or Cohen or Kennedy, if you're in Florida, that they see you making an effort, and they're like, yeah, well, we're probably not going to win on this one. Let's move on to a target that hasn't done anything. So there's no guarantees. The guidelines that are in the WCAG document are being interpreted differently. One person says one thing, another person says another. There is no one, hard and fast rule for these guidelines. And it basically, because there is no hard and fast rules, the plaintiffs can create lawsuits against defendants whether the site's really been made ADA compliant or not. So most of these cases tend to end up in settlement because the business owner can step in and get legal support, and they can promise to go remedy the situation. Well, if a plaintiff says nothing on the website is running right, the photos have no alt tags, I can't tab through using a reader, all of the things that it's supposed to have, it doesn't have, versus if you're just missing one or two things, they're probably going to pass you by if you're trying. But if you're not trying and they want to come after you, they're probably going to pick you. And no one, Acorn, anybody else, we can't guarantee you're not going to get sued. I can't guarantee that your website is ADA compliant and you're never going to be sued. I can show you all the things we do to make you ADA compliant and go over them and tie them back to the guidelines, but I can't guarantee anything. No one can. So here's a little bit of good news in Arizona. Heather passed this on to me. This is a newer article. The Arizona Attorney General moved to intervene and consolidate all of these ADA cases, and then they successfully moved to dismiss the pending case for the cases of lack of standing. So Arizona was taking action, and they're not even one of the hardest hit states, but they're taking action. So I'll give you the article that you can read, but they basically said the State Bar of Arizona asserted now this Strozanek, he was the attorney who was bringing all these cases. Like, there were all the plaintiffs that I found in Florida. They were using different attorneys, obviously. But Strozanek, they said that the judge noted that the suspension is appropriate when a lawyer, this dude, knowingly engages in conduct that violates a duty owed to the profession and causes injury and potential injury to a client, public, or the legal system. But this guy just kept going and going and going and going and going and going and bringing all these crazy lawsuits. Well, they also go on to say that, yeah, they were able to dismiss these lawsuits, but just because they did it for this one guy, this one lawyer, this Arizona business owner should not assume that this suspension means that the dramatic rise in Title III lawsuits will slow down. Those are the lawsuits that innkeepers are finding themselves in. Then they talk about this guy's son, who has filed ADA lawsuits in California against hotels and motels, over 500 in the last 2 years, so like father, like son. So this is very prolific. And then they go on to say business owners, including hotel owners and operators in Arizona and any other state, they really may want to inspect their physical place of business and their websites and online reservation software systems, and the way they provide their services to ensure compliance with ADA to avoid being a target for the next serial plaintiff, i.e., you just don't want to be that low-hanging fruit. And here's the article that they wrote. Now, if you've got one state doing this, hopefully more states are going to follow, and that more attorney generals are going to follow and say, look, these are frivolous. We don't need these things. And hopefully, stave off some of this craziness that's going on because of ADA. Now, that doesn't preclude you needing to have a good ADA usable website, because there are handicapped and disabled people out there who would like to be able to use your web presence. Now, I want to talk about not being a faker, because I've seen this happen too. And I think that Heather may have a story on this one too. But you guys, I'm sure you've all seen the beware of dog sign in a dog bowl in a neighbor's yard, and you know darn well they don't have a dog. They just did it to kind of warn off any burglars in the neighborhood. Well, some websites are adding all kinds of language to their web pages. They're putting them on their footers, they are putting them on a separate accessibility page. And it's not a bad thing to say what you mean to do for your accessibility, but you don't do it and walk away. It's not like putting the dog bowl in the yard and not having the dog. You don't put the accessibility statement on and then never go fix the accessibility problems. So don't use this as a smokescreen. Don't be a faker. If you're going to do the work, or pay your webmaster to do the work so that your website can be as ADA compliant as you and they can make it, then you put on your accessibility statement to declare, we have done all these things we know to do. And if there's anything that's outstanding, and there is things that will be outstanding, just point blank, there are no booking engines in our industry as of 6 weeks ago when I checked that are ADA compliant. They don't pass the ADA compliancy checks. So the reservation software that you are using to sell a room makes you non-compliant. And there's some workarounds for that too. So don't be a faker. That kind of smokescreen is only going to last so long before you get caught. So a few of these WCAG guidelines, just to give you an idea of what we mean by a guideline, because you may not even be aware of what these guidelines are. So let's say that a person has a disability in such a way that they can't use a mouse. That maybe they can blow into a tube to invoke a response, or maybe they can tap a button on a keyboard, but they can't move around on a mouse. So disabled users have to be able to skip content from the navigation with just a keyboard or a special keyboard that they use, and not a mouse. You have to be able to get around your website and throw your mouse away, basically. Header tags and additional coding that your webmaster has to build into your website need to be in place for this to actually work. Then alt tags. If you're writing blog posts and you're using images, here's just a little extra Benny. Make sure you have the right to use those images. There is a lot of companies out there trying to sue you for copyright laws on images. So first of all, make sure it's yours. But then from an ADA standpoint, make sure that you put an alt tag on those images on your website and your blog. Every single image, whether it's a logo or a picture of a bedroom or a picture of wonderful pancakes and sausage, whatever it is, you have to describe it in terms that when the reader reads the alt tag on the image, it lets the person using the tool know what that image is if they can't see it. Then text spacing. There is amount of space amongst all your text for visually disabled people that need to be able to see the wording broken apart wide enough. So text spacing is one of the things. Another one is color ratio. This gets into the design. Can you still design a site the way you want to with your own color scheme? Maybe, maybe not. Because if the text doesn't have a big enough ratio between the background, then that will ding you on the ADA guidelines. Because somebody who has vision, like low vision issues, they're not going to differentiate very well between the background and the words, and they're not going to be able to read them. So there are guidelines on making those color differentials right. your PDFs have to be able to be read by a software reader. So if you have any PDFs on your site, and then videos, this is where it gets sticky. They need captions and a transcript. So there's a lot happening that you have to take care of for somebody who has a disability to be able to use your web presence. So what else needs to be ADA compliant? Now let's move beyond the website and let's talk about things in the website. So we talked about the look and feel of the website, but now let's talk about the other things that may be on the website. So plugins that are used on your website. Like for instance, we use social share buttons on our websites. Well, our social share buttons have to be ADA compliant. If you run our social share buttons through the test, it says they're not. When you go to the actual compliancy and run it to visualize it, and you call the company that built the plugin, they're like, "Yep, it is ADA compliant." They're not testing it properly. They haven't upgraded their testing tools. I'm like, okay, but you if you have a WordPress site or any other site that's done with a CRM system, you're probably going to have plugins. It's not just the web code; it's the plugins that have to be ADA compliant too. Here's a good example. Your photo rotations, if you have anything that is rotating a photo, you have to have a stop button front and center for users who have issues with movement-induced seizures. So you can't just have something moving on the screen. It has to be able to be stoppable so that somebody who does have those kind of problems can stop it and proceed. Your booking engine needs to be ADA compliant. And when we get to the testing tools, you can run a couple of pages on your booking engine through it and see if they are. And basically, any product that is integral for a guest to successfully use your website, any type of disabled person who needs to successfully get to the end and book a room through your website, that product has to be usable by them because you're using the product and they're using your website. And the only way to get to a booking is to get to the end of it. It needs to be usable. And integral is very different than just a single link off of your website. So say you have a list of restaurants and you link to a restaurant page. It's not integral to them, using your site and making a booking. It's just a link. Links don't count, but booking engines do. So the reason you want to use an ADA accessibility statement. So we talked about these statements. It's to let disabled users know you're attempting to give them the very best same experience as a non-disabled person. So you're letting them know you have taken the steps to make their experience just as similar, if as close to equal as somebody who has no disabilities. And you also have to give a disabled user a way to contact you directly should they believe you have not achieved your goal for them, because this helps you identify and deal with issues. I mean, if you were to be sued because of some little thing and you have done all of the things that you needed to do and you missed one little thing, the judge is going to look at it and go, "Hey, they told you to call them to have them help you fix whatever it was that was causing the disabled person not to be able to use the site." If you put on an ADA accessibility statement after you have got your site as clean and as ADA compliant as possible, then you're giving the person a conduit to get a hold of you to solve a problem before it gets to a lawsuit. Now, like I said, I have yet to find a booking engine that's ADA compliant. I've talked to a few of them. I know one of them's working on this, but you need to make sure that it is very easy for a disabled person to call you and book with you, because that booking engine may or may not satisfy their needs if they are disabled. And you should never fake an ADA accessibility statement. Never go out there and say you're doing something when you're not. And Heather, is that a good place for you to hop in and tell the story you were telling me?
Yes. So there is a restaurant chain that was actually sued, I think back in, if I'm looking at the PDF right, back near the end of 2006. And they said that they were actually going to work on website accessibility. They put a website accessibility statement on their website, but they have actually been sued several more times because they have not done anything. And it's been thrown out in court as a not moot case because they have not done anything about actually becoming accessible.
So they basically faked their accessibility stuff.
Yes.
So you can't fake it. You don't want to fake it, because if you fake it, you're going to end up getting caught. So let us continue. And Annie, I haven't checked. Do we have any questions?
We do.
Oh, well then let's just go back a page and take the question.
And we have some great comments too. So Ronnie gave us a link to the letter that the 103 congressmen sent to the Department of Justice, asking them to publish guidance to help businesses navigate this complex issue. And I'm going to go ahead and share that in the chat box for everybody to see. Let's see here. I'm going to try to share that in the chat box at least. Let's see here. To everybody. Okay, so thank you, Ronnie, for that. Let's see here. And then also another comment from Ronnie that HR 620 ADA Education and Reform Act passed the House, now in the Senate where it has little support. Then we have a question from Ted. We need to put a website accessibility statement on our site. Has anyone looked to see whether there is any relation to sites that already have accessibility statements and the lawsuits? Has anyone looked? And I think that's what we just talked about. So I think we possibly answered that question for you, Ted, in the meantime after you asked it. And then this is an interesting question, and I think it is maybe physical property versus web property. And this is from Mirren. I was told that the B&B we purchased 3 years ago was grandfathered against having to comply with ADA regulations. It was opened in the 80s, and that we shouldn't make any effort to become ADA compliant, because if we do anything pro-ADA, we would trigger the loss of being grandfathered and now must comply going forward. Sound plausible?
That sounds like a lawyer question, because there is a difference between your physical ADA requirements. Because I don't know how many of you guys know, but I ran a bed and breakfast here in Colorado Springs. We opened it from scratch. And because we were grandfathered not to need to have an elevator, we didn't have to, have ramps for wheelchairs, because we had no way to put people in a we didn't have handicapped rooms. We were too small. But your legal advice, the question you want to know is, I understand them saying, well, if you start to look like you're moving towards a physical ADA compliancy, maybe that could mess with your grandfathering. But what about the non-physical virtual side of the web presence? That is the question you need to get answered by your attorney, because the web side of it has nothing to do with your physical side. It has to do with people being able to at least get to your website and understand that, hey, if you're in a wheelchair, I can't put you in a room because you can't go up the stairs. So if that person, let's say that handicapped person has to use special devices because they're handicapped and they can't type, then you've got to make sure that your website will work for them to get to the point to understand that, hey, you can't accommodate them. So you can kind of see where that's going, where you have to give them the information that they themselves can process. But does that, when you make your website compliant, does that in any way, shape, or form affect your physical side? That's a legal question you need to ask somebody who knows, somebody with, a lawyer who knows what's going on for your area, because there are two sides of this. I mean, there's the side of the physical and there's the side of the virtual. Anything else before I jump into the accessibility stuff?
So Ted clarified here for us. He says, no, I am asking if lawsuits are being prompted by having a statement on the website, i.e., is the drive-by lawsuits being sourced by people looking on the web for statements?
I met with a company out of Florida who, just by the virtue of having so many Florida lawsuits, they've become kind of a Florida expert. And the first thing they do to get a person who has been summoned, subpoenaed, whatever the word is, who have a lawsuit against them, is to immediately put up an accessibility statement saying, we are in process as of this date making all of the following changes. And that is getting people in Florida pretty much to a settlement standpoint where the judge says, look, you can't, you got what you wanted, Mr. Plaintiff. You wanted them to take action. We're taking action. Let's settle. They're settling out of court. So those accessibility statements from that standpoint, I know are getting people out of lawsuits. The question that you're asking is if you put on an accessibility statement, is that going to raise a red flag? In my mind, it's not going to raise a red flag if you actually are accessible. But if you put it on and you're not, then yeah, somebody would go in and go, oh, look, they said they're accessible, but this doesn't work and this doesn't work and this doesn't work. They're lying. So if having an accessibility statement saying you did all of the things you know to do and the things that you know you can't do, you've defined, should protect you when somebody comes after you. But if you lie about it and you fake it, then they start running their test and they see that they can't. I mean, and technically they can't file a lawsuit because you don't pass a test. They're filing lawsuits because they physically can show a reason why they can't use your website. So I do not know there is any studies that say real accessibility statements that are in place because you truly are accessible are causing lawsuits. I don't know that. But I do know that the company in Florida that has been helping people out of Florida helping people with Florida lawsuits, that is how they get people into a settlement phase with the person who's suing them, the plaintiff, and then them being the defendant with their lawyer. And as soon as they hire a company that says, this is what we're going to do, we put the accessibility statement on saying what we're going to do and give some timelines, then the judge will make the plaintiff back off. So, and if somebody needs to talk to them, I can hook you up with them to discuss that. But they have had an opportunity because there's so many people being hit in Florida that they got a chance to really study it. So, anything else, Annie?
Yeah. Lisa?
Go ahead, Heather.
No, and this is in relation to that question, and I understand why they're asking. This has unfortunately happened before, prompted by people with service dogs and other ADA physical issues, not necessarily web accessibility, where if someone has been in the news, for example, or someone has a statement on their website saying we do not accept dogs or service dogs, and then people are roaming the web looking specifically for those things and then hitting people with a lawsuit. So I understand where the question's coming from.
But Heather, you agree, if you have done all the steps that you know to do,
right,
even if they find your accessibility statement, they have to prove there's a reason to sue you.
Oh, no, I agree, but I understand why they keep asking that question, because it is a legitimate question.
I get it. Awesome. Okay, Annie, next.
As to whether do we know if people are looking for accessibility statements, we don't know if they're doing that.
We could use our keyword finder tool and go see if anybody's even hunting for that phrase. That might be interesting.
That's not a bad idea. The last question we have is, will you be providing a sample statement for us to post saying that we are in process of identifying and updating our sites to comply with ADA?
No, I will not be. Just go out to Google and you can search for accessibility statement builders, accessibility statement helpers. You will find lots of examples. We have created one for our clients because we know what we've done for them and we know what they don't have working, because I can't make it work because it's their booking engine. But you don't want to just take somebody's statement. You actually want to build one, and you don't want to build it. You want your webmaster to build it. I mean, we did this for our clients because I know what we're coding. So I can say what we're coding and what's been done. You can't just take one and use it. There's builders out there, but you have to build it based on the answers to the questions. And you can't just copy one. The guy in Florida, his is very, very loosey-goosey, kind of like, we are in the we have hired this company. We're in the process of doing X, Y, and Z, and we're building. In the meantime, you have an alternative use site. You may use this while we're taking care of that. And they basically stripped everything out of it. It's just white background with words. They have these steps to get you out of the lawsuit. But if you don't get sued and you're trying to get taken care of in advance, your webmaster should take care of building your accessibility statement, because they're the ones who coded it to make sure that it was done right. And they're the ones who should tell you or tell your guests what they did for you, because you hired them to do it. You paid them to do it. This isn't free. I mean, this is a lot of coding, especially if the webmaster hasn't ever done this before. This is a lot of work. We've been doing ADA compliancy for years now. And we just kind of, when everybody started getting sued, we said, okay, let's put the final bow on the top and let's go ahead and wrap it up and do the accessibility statement. So, all right. So this is the accessibility statement that we are using in general, but should something change because somebody has something different on their site that we can't control, that is not compliant, we would mention it in here. So this is how it reads, and I don't think I have it. Yeah, I don't have it written, so we just have to read it from the image. And Reed Bed and Breakfast is committed to making our website accessible to people with disabilities. We have designed our website to be accessible for impaired users to see, navigate, interact, and understand the content provided as per the WWWC, the WC3 website consortium, and the Accessibility 2.0 level AA guidelines. These are the guidelines we've gone after. And AA means you've hit the A's too. We have tested the functionality of this website using this tool and also using the Chrome Accessibility Audit Tool. So we are using these tools, because if somebody says they've got a problem and our tool doesn't pick it up, well, then we need to see what the problem is, because we're saying we've done all we know to do. We've also tested keyboard-only functionality so that people that use screen readers or can't use a mouse are able to navigate through the website pages efficiently. We continue to make every effort to meet evolving accessibility guidelines. Our reservation system does not meet our guidelines. This is something we are continuing to address with our reservation company so that it too will be accessible to people with disabilities in the future. If you find you're having difficulty determining availability or booking an accommodation, please contact us at the links below and we will assist you directly. I mean, you have to be available to help them if they can't. And if you look at the upper part of the screen, well, this isn't the new capture. I'll go to the live site. As we continue to improve our website functionality, we appreciate your concerns and suggestions. We welcome impaired users to share accessibility issues you may find. So please come to us first. Don't sue us. Just come to us. We will get it fixed. We are here. We want to work with you. If you find something on our website that you can't make function for you, you need to tell us so I can help you fix it. And that is the innkeeper talking, but that is Acorn helping the innkeeper know what to say, so that we are very clear that we have taken the action to make the site accessible. Okay, so now there's all kinds of accessibility statements. This is after we've made the site accessible, and we've done everything we know to do with the 2.0 AA guidelines. So let's talk about screen readers. Hang on a second. Let me go to Andon Reed's live site real quick. Andon Reed. And I'm just using them as an example. Okay, so let's go to their site. All right, you see up here, we added a little bit more language. We're doing this now for all websites because of the booking engine issues. If they can't make the site work, it's going to read to them, call 828-452-3089 for assistance. So that if somebody is disabled, we have said blatantly, if you need assistance, you call us. Now, yeah, that messes with your business plan, because if you don't want people calling you and you put it on there and somebody's not disabled and they go, oh, well, I could just call. Yeah, I see where that's a problem. But on the flip side, if you're trying to be ADA compliant so that you don't get sued, you have to make it easy for somebody who can't book on your booking engine because it's not ADA compliant a way to book by calling you. So you have to kind of have to walk a fine line here. So we're using a bit of different language to try to help with that. Okay, here we go. So I want to talk about screen readers because a lot of this is visual, but then some of this gets into like you got to make sure your navigation is working right. So I'm going to show you how this works. You can't have keyboard traps. It's basically where a blind user could get stuck because they can't move forward using their keyboard where you have forward, forward, enter, backward, backward. You got to be able to get through the site and hear what's going on. There's also standards as to how blind and low vision people can use a computer. And your website needs to follow those standards so that a blind individual can experience your site in a similar fashion, just as a seeing person can. And I just downloaded a free screen reader. They go all the way from free to really high end for somebody who is really disabled and needs to use one daily as one of their tools. So it gives a blind or a vision impaired person the ability to use a computer and still learn what's there when they can't see it or they can't see it well. So if you want to play with this with your own site, go to www.nvaccess.org. And I'm going to go ahead and load this. Now it's very loud because it's constantly talking to you in a computer voice. So bear with me as we do this because it's going to get noisy. So let's go ahead. I got to get back out here. I've got mine loaded and I'm going to go ahead and click it and I'm going to turn it on. And it's going to read the help window. Okay, so let's see if I start getting the tab key working. Can you hear it? They're saying, on-site gift certificates link, and I'm hitting the tab key. And then it says, click on here for photo gallery link. Now, I'm not on any tab at the moment, and it says skip to primary content link because we had to code it that way. So the person who's hearing this, they can't see anything. They can only hear, or maybe they can't see much. So now if it said skip to primary content link, if I click right now, it's going to jump down into the body and start reading me the text. But I also want to show you how the navigation works. So I'm not going to skip to primary content link. I'm going to keep hitting the tab key. So that's the link to the secondary content. So they can maneuver down into the site without having to go through the navigation. And your webmaster has to know how to code all this. So now we have the home visited link. So they have to be able to hear it. About the inn. Link to history of the inn. Link to inn policies. So the reader actually reads the person, what they're maneuvering with, and they use their keyboard that they're familiar with, and they know what keys do what. Your website has to respond to those keystrokes. Let's see if I can jump to the primary content link. Okay. I'm standing on the skip to the primary content link. Okay, what did we just read? I lost where I was. So it jumps down into the body and it'll start reading through the content. So your website not only has to meet those visual guidelines, but it has to meet these reader guidelines so that as they go from page to page, they can hit their special keyboard with special keys, or they may use just a regular keyboard with their tabs and their enters and their up and down arrows. But your website has to respond to what their keystrokes are doing, or they can't maneuver through the site. Now, I'm going to go ahead and shut this off because it's going to keep reading if I don't. There we go. All right, so we've exited out. So when we talk about a reader, that's what the reader is. And I was not using the mouse. I was using tab key and the up and down arrows. That's what I was using. Shift tab to go backwards, tab key to go forwards, and then I was using the arrows because I could see it. But a person who can't see it, they just keep hitting it until they got to where they wanted to be, or they heard something they wanted to hear more about. So that's kind of how the readers work. So are you as ADA compliant as you can be, and how do you know? Well, Chrome gives you an accessibility checker, but the thing is that these accessibility checkers are not 100%. We use them for things that we know they can tell us, but we also do our other testing with our readers so that we know that the readers are working right. And keep in mind that sometimes they give false positives, just like they said that our share buttons didn't work. Well, they do. They just can't tell that they do. So in Chrome, and I don't think I'm gonna physically do the Chrome testing tool, but you guys can do it in Chrome if you like. The other one's easier to run, so I'm going to do the one that's easier to run. In the upper right-hand corner of Chrome, there's those three dots, and then you click on More Tools, Developer Tools, and then the right arrow, click over to where you click Audits, and then under Audits, choose Accessibility, and then load your website in the window, and it'll run it. Quite a bunch of steps, but Chrome turns out about the same results as our AC Checker tool, and it also gives us quality feedback. But again, AC Checker, it's a free tool, but it doesn't always catch everything, and it can show false positives. Neither of these things are going to catch any problems with your readers because they don't check that. They can't. You literally need to physically QA your reader and make sure that when you hit the tab key that you have a chance to jump to the main content and the secondary content. And then as you tab through, you have the right to hit enter at any point in time and jump to wherever it is. That if you hover an image, I didn't do that, but if I did, it would read me the alt tag. So if I was reading through the text and it brought me to a picture, it would tell me the wording on the picture. Picture is da-da-da-da. I mean, it would read it to you. Link is da-da-da-da. So it has to work with the readers too. So I will take some volunteers if you like, and we can run your sites through the AC Checker tool. I'd take 2 or 3 of you guys just so you can see how it works. But keep in mind, neither of these are doing the keyboard testing for you to be able to use the navigation. So let's go look at the AC Checker tool. So do I have any volunteers?
All right. If you'd like to volunteer, just go ahead and type your website URL into the questions box, and we will go ahead and run that.
And I will just dump in and read while we're waiting for volunteers. Now, it's probably going to catch our share buttons, but we've contacted the company, and if there were to be a lawsuit, they would just write a letter saying, no, they work just fine. So.
All right, we have a volunteer.
All right, Annie. Well, this is running on and read. Give me the name of the volunteer so I can get the website.
It's www.ellwangerestate.com.
Okay. All right. So, and this, it says we have 2 known problems, and see what it is? It's the share buttons, add to any share buttons. And this is a false positive. Those 2 are really not problems because we verified that the company that built that plugin really is valid. This tester is just not picking it up right. So we're going with this is good. Now let's do the Ellwanger Estate. Hopefully I said that right. Oh, and by the way, just a little a side note here. You guys are not on a secure server, and as of today, Google and Chrome are telling people to, be very careful using your site. I think today was the deadline because you're not secure. So you want to get your webmaster to move you to a secure server. All right. So why is it saying we have no known problems? I mean, that seems weird that absolutely nothing is broken. So let's go look at it. Make sure. try another page. Just double check a secondary page. But if that is true, then that's great. And we'll check a third page, and then it looks like from a checker standpoint, you're not running into too many problems, but you have a pretty simple design too. I may turn back on the NDA thing, and we'll run through it with that too. So let's pick one more room. But everything on your site's kind of, oh, well, this one may give us a different answer. Let's try it. Nope, it picked it up all right. So from a checker standpoint, now granted, the checker is useful, but it's not going to necessarily catch everything. So I'm going to go back to your site. I'm going to go to the home page because I think that'll be the easiest thing to use. I'll get back to the home page. This? Okay, there we go. Now let's try it with this. Welcome to romantic bed and breakfast in Rochester, NY Vanilla Firefox, romantic bed and breakfast in Rochester, front page, slider 03. Okay, so we're going to start with the tab key. I think that was the logo. Okay, so that was the Book Now link. Let me hit the Shift tab. Okay, I'm not seeing where I can jump directly to the. Okay, that was the Book Now. That's the rooms. And from a visual standpoint, we don't even know the tab keys are bumping on those things. So maybe your webmaster could like put a little box around them or something so that if somebody does have some amount of vision, they'd know when you're hitting them. Blank. Wonder what blank is. Well, let's hit enter on blank and see where it goes. Didn't go anywhere. Okay, where is that going to take me? Yeah, I think that though you're not getting any errors from a... Okay, let's start here. And then I don't have anything on this little whatever it is. It's not telling me what it is. So even though the tester is telling you you don't have any testable problems, but when I'm running it with the reader, I have no way to get down to the content without actually, actually going through all the navigation. The navigation isn't really highlighting so that somebody who has some amount of vision can see that they're bouncing over those things. And then I'm not sure about photography, but when I hit this I love ins, it never told me what it was. It didn't read it to me. It maybe it doesn't have an alt tag if it's an image, but it looks like it's an outgoing thing. I don't know what that is. And I guess I could click on it. So you want to make sure that everything. See, these aren't telling us what we're seeing either. It should read you, and are these just to see? It's not reading to me what the picture is. It should say beautiful purple and orange and green wedding bouquet in an oak tree or whatever that is. I mean, it should be reading to me what those things are, and I'm not hearing those things. So let me turn that off because... Oh, wait, I said exit. Let me go out. Come on, stop. There we go. So even though the testing tool thinks that you're fine, when you're physically using it, I'm not getting what you would expect to have when you get to those images. It should be reading, living room and dining room with a large window to the outside. You should be describing the photos, or outside porch with rockers and wrought iron chairs, covered outside porch. It should be telling the person who can't see that picture what that picture is. So even though your tool tested fine, when you get into it and you start physically doing the quality assurance on it, it should be telling you what those images are when they're hovered or when you pass over them by the reader going through them. So that's the kind of thing that you want to be doing with your testing to make sure that you can't just trust the tools. The tools are good to identify if there are any problems, go to fix them or go identify what they are. But when you get into the site and you run those readers have to follow the process in which a blind person would be following. And it looks like you have a little room for work there, and you need to get to a secure server. So, and we're going to run out of time. We already did. So let me go ahead and go back. I think everybody kind of knows how to do this. I would encourage you to do this with your own site. And if anybody wants to stay, I'm happy to run more. But I know that we had an hour. So Heather, how do you want us to wrap this up?
I would say if people have more questions, this is important. So if people would stay on and they have questions, I'm free to go ahead and keep on as long as you guys can and need to.
All right. So Annie, do we have anybody else who wanted us to try their site?
Yes, HudsonValleyLodging.com. And then while you're doing that, Lisa, we have a question from May I have a question about alt tags. How specific do they need to be compliant? You just need to describe what is in the image. So an example would be, if you had a breakfast plate and it had eggs and bacon on it, you could say breakfast plate with eggs and bacon accompanied by coffee and orange juice. You're just literally basically describing what is in the photo. We usually recommend between 10 and 20 words, and you're using adjectives and colors in the description. So it's not, you don't have to write a whole paragraph about every photo, but just, a brief description of what is specifically in the, exactly in the photo. You don't want to use keywords. You don't want to use, say, exterior of, Bisland House Bed and Breakfast, for example. That doesn't really say anything to anybody. It just tells you it's the exterior of a bed and breakfast, and it doesn't describe it, but you might say large 3-story house with white columns in front, painted blue, or something of that nature. But don't use it as an opportunity to try to sneak keywords in. That is not the point of it. The point of it is so that the person using a screen reader knows what's in the photo, and also to keep the screen reader running. If a screen reader sometimes will run up against an empty alt tag, it just stops. And then as you could hear from when Lisa was, giving us that example, it's already fairly difficult, just in and of itself. So if you were to have it butt up against something and stop like that, it would just become very frustrating. So I think I over-answered that question, but that's the answer.
Okay, and then Hudson Valley Lodging, you guys are one of our clients, and I think this is a relatively new site, Annie. Did this one go out this year?
I don't know if it was this year, maybe 2017.
So we have our process. So if you didn't come to our webinar in, it was 6 weeks ago, we are on the header and the footer is what the problem here is, and it's just a quick fix for the entire site. So anybody who built a site with us this year is getting the final treatment with the accessibility statements, and we're going back through to make sure that nothing is missing. You are welcome to request that be done for the group site. This is just a minor thing.
Lisa, this was built in 2015.
Oh,
I thought it was a little newer than it was too.
So that's good, because there's just a couple of minor things. It's the header that's missing the alt tag on your logo, because we put all the alt tags on all the pictures, but it just the logos, for some reason, we weren't thinking, oh, we need to put an alt tag on the logo. So to go ahead and request that, Annie, go ahead and email them the links for them to do the request. And then the other one is, it just looks like somewhere along the lines, and it could be text was changed, but it looks like a header tag got in the way of a lower rated header tag. So that's a minor fix too. And then once that's fixed, then also we should go ahead and check your tabbing to make sure that you have a pretty simple navigation, but we want to make sure it all tabs through properly, and that somebody can jump to their other section. So we have a process in place for people who have some minor issues like this. Now, if you have a really old website, no one's going to really be able to make that ADA compliant. You need to upgrade that thing to like a CMS. For anybody, I mean, with your webmaster, I'm not saying you have to use us. I'm just saying you have to get it upgraded. And we have our process in place should anybody ask us to say, hey, can you go back, sure, and make sure that everything's in place, and can you get our accessibility statement on saying everything's in place? So in the case of the Hudson Valley Lodging Group, all you have to do is file a request, and we will take care of it for you, because it's really close. It's just, like I said, we're kind of, this year is the year we're putting wrapping it up in a neat little box and putting a bow on it, just so that we are minimizing any risk for lawsuits. And should somebody still want to sue you, we've done everything we know to do. You have a really good standing if you have to get an attorney to say, hey, what are you doing that? Well, you shouldn't be doing that. There's no reason to. So, anybody else want to try, Annie?
No, we didn't have anybody else.
All right. Do we have any last questions?
No, we do not.
Well, I do hope this was helpful. We tried to make it really simple so everybody can understand the bits and pieces that were going on. And then send Heather any questions you have. I am sure between her and I, we can get you some answers. But thanks for coming today, everyone. Heather, back to you.
Thank you very, very much, Lisa. Two just quick things. I know you touched on some of this stuff, but it does keep coming up. I know that there are some web designers out there who are using red text for their hyperlinks, and they're not underlined. And is our understanding that that's kind of a big no-no?
That's one of the guidelines, is that when you hit something that's a link, it has to have the differential in the color, and it's got to let the person know that it's a link.
Well, and this is a big one, because there are a lot of people, even without ADA compliance, that are colorblind. So if you have a red link and black or gray background, they're not going to see it anyway.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, and I keep going back with the ADA on this, and I keep getting the same exact answer on this. This came up last year in terms of having videos embedded on the website. Even if they are not your own videos, they still need to have the transcript with them and have the closed captioning. So I know that there's a lot of innkeepers out there that have perhaps put local tourism videos on their websites embedded. They're going to have to look at that as well.
And what we think, but this is just what we think, your webmaster should answer it for you, is that if you want to have a video and you don't embed it and you link off to it, it will help mitigate some of that responsibility. But if you embed it, it is now part of your website. Heather, your thoughts on that?
That's what I have the understanding as well. So
there's some get arounds for that. You could do a snapshot of the first photo, put an alt tag on, describe that, click here, this is a click for a video, and hook the link to it, describe what the video is, and then link off the website so that it is not embedded. Then your responsibility changes hands. Oh, and I didn't cover the other thing. Well, no, wait, that's GDPR. Never mind, whole other subject. I was going to talk about GDPR requirements on forms, but Google's going to, it doesn't matter. Forget that. It's YouTube. And I hope that YouTube's going to make this easier, but we still haven't found a real easy way to get captions on and to get a transcript. And then you don't have any control over somebody else's video, so it's better to link to them.
And in terms of transcript, if I can make a suggestion, putting a transcript on, and YouTube technically will output a transcript for you, but it usually takes several hours if it's longer than 5 minutes to actually fix the transcription. There's something called Mechanical Turk through Amazon, and you can actually get something transcribed for very, very cheap money.
And where do you recommend, because Heather, I know you have your own clients, where are
Yep.
you putting your transcripts? Are you embedding them on a PDF? Are you embedding them, where are you putting the transcripts versus the closed caption?
The transcripts themselves well, right now we're just not embedding video in websites.
So you're not having to do it yet. Okay.
No, we're not having to do that yet, but we're making sure that if we do video, we're actually putting the text on the screen in the first place.
Right. So you got your captions on.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Because I'm as with Heather, we're not suggesting you embed videos that don't already have the closed caption. But from a transcript standpoint, it's like, how do you put that on without really messing up the look and feel of your website?
That's a tough one. I mean, again, and when I've asked the ADA about it, that was actually their suggestion that you just said, was to actually take a screenshot of the video and then link to it off-site. But their other suggestion for an actual transcript was have a separate page on the website specifically for the transcript that was text only. And again, the link. Yeah. And again, this is what the ADA said. This is something that I would definitely run by a lawyer, though. You know, the ADA is interesting like that. Anytime you call them consistently, you get some slightly different questions and slightly different answers depending on who you talk to. And sometimes they're very different answers depending on who you talk to.
Which just goes back to, there is no hard and fast answer here. Mm-hmm. We just have to do our best, show that that we've done our due diligence and we care, and hope for the best. Doing nothing is definitely not what you want to do. You want to try to do something, and you want to do as best as you can. So, all right. If we have no more questions, thank you, everybody, for your time. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And if anybody has questions, Lisa is pretty easy to find. I know we've had her on many times before. You can always email me at marketing@paii.org, and I'd be happy to pass along any questions or comments to her. Thank you so much, you guys, for coming on and this great, valuable information. Again, we have recorded this webinar, and it will be available on the PI members-only section of the website by tomorrow. So thank you, everyone, and have a terrific rest of your day.